One of the more enjoyable elements of the vote of no confidence build-up has been Tory big hitters lashing out at each other in public. The noisiest on this front has been no prizes for guessing Nadine Dorries. In response to Jeremy Hunt tweeting that he had no confidence in Boris Johnson, Dorries wrote, "On the afternoon of 23rd July 2020, when I was health minister, you telephoned me to tell me that we had to handle the pandemic following the example set by the East China, that people testing positive should be removed from their homes and placed into isolation hotels for 2 weeks. You said your wife's family had experience of this during SARS. I said that British people would never tolerate being removed from their homes and loved ones, at which point you demanded I show you the evidence for that. Your handling of the pandemic would have been a disaster. Your pandemic preparation during 6 years as health secretary was found wanting and inadequate. Your duplicity right now is destabilising the party and country to serve your own personal ambition more so. You told others that PM and Gov would swiftly collapse on back of Brexit and you would swoop in. You told me as much in Victoria Station after the general election. If you had been leader, you'd have handed the keys of number 10 to Corbyn. You've been wrong about almost everything. You are wrong again now." Interesting, Nadine Dorries thinks that in 2020, if we'd have adopted some of the COVID policies of East Asia, that would have been a terrible thing. Obviously, before the vaccine rollout, they were the best in the world when it came to COVID responses. You wouldn't necessarily have had to force people to go into hotels if they were positive. You could just offer them that possibility. That actually would have been a very sensible policy. I'm not sure why she thinks asking for the evidence would be a bad thing. But obviously the biggest thing here is she is saying that the Tory government, which has been in power for 12 years, by the way, very poorly prepared for the pandemic. This is a Tory, recently she was a health minister, saying that the bad preparation going into this pandemic was the fault of a Tory health minister. She was a Tory MP at the time, by the way. I'm not sure if she was making noises about the failures of her government at that point in time. Ash, there's some pretty remarkable admissions, aren't they?
Well, what this is a scorched earth policy from Nadine Dorries, and it is an attempt to dissuade others from doing what Jeremy Hunt has done by going, well, look, I can drag your name through the mud too, and I can list specific instances where we've had particular conversations, and I'll go public with it, thus sort of breaking the rule of omerta, which tends to govern insidery Westminster politics. So that's what she's trying to do there. In terms of the admission about Jeremy Hunt's pandemic preparedness, I think that this is something of saying the quiet bit out loud, which is the way in which the Conservative Party have operated over the last 12 years isn't really as a, coherent unit. It's kind of this multi-bodied organism where, in order to ensure the survival of the whole, other bits get sort of amputated and cut off and chucked away by another part of that body, which then sort of like rises to dominance. That's how it works. And over the course of the last, 12 years of Conservative governments now, what you've had is a program of slash and burn of the public sector, a total hobbling of the state's capacity to do things, and a continual sense of crisis when it comes to meeting some of the most important and pressing issues of the day, whether that's something like our healthcare system or elderly care or climate change or indeed pandemic preparedness. And every single person who is part of the Parliamentary Conservative Party knows this, that is part of the deal with each new government, each new election manifesto. What your job is to sort of be able to continue shitting in the swimming pool of public discourse, all while kind of condemning this imagined Tory who isn't you for fouling up the waters in the first place. That's what they do. Now, normally that's by implication and suggestion rather than going for, the RPG Nadine Dorries has reached for. But it is something I think quite revealing about how the Conservative Party conceive of themselves as a political organism.
It wasn't just Nadine Dorries getting involved in these flame wars. Jacob Rees-Mogg also got involved. He was targeting Jesse Norman, who's another former minister who came out against the Prime Minister.
Jesse points out that he was energy minister and unfortunately no proper energy plan was developed. So Mr. Norman must take some responsibility for that. He doesn't do so in his letter.
So Tory energy policy has been shit as well as their pandemic preparation. An interesting pitch from Jacob Rees-Mogg. Later in the day, Nadine Dorries was asked by Beth Rigby about her tweets attacking Jeremy Hunt.
Some people would say that it's sort of demeaning of the office of a cabinet minister to make such personal blue-on-blue attacks against a colleague who doesn't agree with the Prime Minister. I mean, he's allowed to disagree. I mean, what do you say to those people that are quite shocked by what you've said of Jeremy Hunt today?
Well, if they're shocked, it's because they're probably people who are going to vote against the Prime Minister anyway. And what I would say is probably demeaning of a former cabinet minister and somebody who puts themselves forward as a potential leadership candidate to repeatedly say they're not going to issue a challenge while we're at war with Ukraine, and then on the day Russia fires rockets into Kyiv, issue that challenge.
So I assume that was a slip of the tongue when she said we're at war with Ukraine still, because we're not at war with Ukraine, but we're also not at war with Russia. So, I mean, it's pretty dangerous sort of diplomatically, making it seem as if we are just because you want to win a leadership election or, avoid a leadership election. Ash, I want to know from you, though, what did you make of, the only people that would be shocked by my tweets about Jeremy Hunt are people that wanted Boris Johnson to leave anyway, wanted Boris Johnson to lose anyway, so shut up. I mean, clearly they didn't like him anyway.
Like, I'm sorry that your nan died or something, but you can't make me be mates with you. I was just laughing because I was like, can you imagine if your last moments on this earth were hearing the nuclear missiles speeding towards your city because Nadine Dorries accidentally declared war on Russia? Like, can you imagine if that's how it all ends for us? People used to talk about Gordon Brown's government of many talents. I think that you'd call Boris Johnson's cabinet one of not entirely obvious talents. Neither Jacob Rees-Mogg nor Nadine Dorries, I think, are particularly skillful here. Jacob Rees-Mogg, I think, has cultivated an aura, a mirage of intelligence purely by being privately educated and dressing like a Victorian orphan who is like mown down by a cart horse or something. But neither of them are really Parliament's best and brightest. Even then, that's grading on a curve. I think when Nadine Dorries is like, well, people who'd be shocked are people, who weren't going to vote anyway. Has she ever heard the phrase, you attract more flies with honey than with vinegar? I mean, she may have heard that and then gone, well, no one ever said anything about napalm. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just seems counterproductive.
Because, I mean, I never know how much to believe these things, but there were like lots of the lobby journalists tweeting that an MP told them they weren't decided yet whether or not to vote for Boris Johnson in the confidence vote. But Nadine Dorries' like tweets about Jeremy Hunt persuaded them to vote against him because they were like, the people in charge of this party are dangerous. We need to get rid of them before they can do any more damage. Now, MPs like to give lobby journalists these stories that make them sound like they're, not completely amoral, like they're not just working in their own self-interest. Like, oh, she's crossed the line with these very undignified tweets of hers. Like, I'm not sure if that's what really motivates them. But at the same time, it does seem like a really strange strategy. I mean, you have one job as a Boris Johnson outrider, which is to try and essentially sweet talk Tory MPs to say, look, our interests are your interests. Boris Johnson is, whatever it might seem at this point of time, a safe pair of hands. You should vote for the guy. It's also worth noting, this is a secret ballot. Like the whole, I'm going to intimidate you to make sure you vote for my guy. Otherwise, I'm going to attack you publicly. I'm not sure what the thinking is when it is a secret ballot. It's also interesting, actually, that Tory MPs were apparently banned from taking their phones into the 1922 committee room where they vote. This is speculation from my part, but one possible explanation of that is that the chair of the 1922 committee recognised that there might be people on the government side who are asking people to take a picture of their ballot. I would find that totally plausible and within keeping of this government. There are also lots of lobby journalists tweeting that Boris Johnson was offering everyone a job if they vote for him, which, to be honest, isn't, not too much to worry about when you think of who they'll be replacing. It can't get worse in most of these positions. All of us here at Novara Media are working harder than ever to keep scrutinising establishment politicians and the media barons who protect them. We don't have billionaire funders. We don't have advertising partnerships. We're funded entirely by you. If you've ever thought about supporting us, now's the time to go to novaramedia.com/support and donate anything you can from just £1 per month. Defy the corporate media, join our monthly supporters and help build our supporter base to 10,000 strong.